following was written by Chris Bertman for Scanner News on December 21st, 2023. Can we hear us?
I think so.
All right, let's hope. Terrence Yeakey didn't kill himself. On the evening of May 8th, 1996, Sergeant Terrence Yeakey's body was found in a field near his hometown of El Reno in Oklahoma with slashed wrists, a slashed throat, and a gunshot wound to his head. His vehicle was found roughly 1.5 miles away on the side of a road nearby with the seats unbolted, floorboards torn up, and side panels removed. 2 to 3 liters of Yeakey's blood filled the interior of the car. A gun holster and razor blade were found in the police sergeant's car, which was covered in his blood. Despite being found in neighboring Canadian County, the Oklahoma City Police Department responded to the scene of their colleague's death and swiftly determined Yeakey had self-harmed, locked his doors, rolled up his windows, and walked 1.5 miles into the field where he shot himself in the head. An autopsy was not conducted. OCPD did not release a copy of their report on Yeakey's death. Just 1 year prior, the then husband and father of 2 was one of the first to respond to the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building, where he rescued several people from the rubble after the Oklahoma City bombing. The OKC police officer was scheduled to be honored with a Medal of Valor for his heroic efforts on April 19th, 1995, just 3 days after his body was discovered. Several theories surfaced which attempted to explain the OCPD sergeant's sudden and mysterious death. Some pointed towards his recent divorce from his wife, Tonya Rivera Yeakey, who had filed a victim's protective order against her husband in February 1995 for a previous matter. Others suggested Yeakey was overcome with PTSD and guilt over his inability to save more survivors from the rubble of the bombing site after sustaining an injury during his final rescue that day. One theory even claimed the OCPD sergeant, who was an instructor in the anti-drug educational program, Drug Abuse Resistance Education, otherwise known as DARE, was battling a drug addiction himself. However, family and those close with Sergeant Yeakey reject those theories and believe Terrence was murdered. This is Inverted World Live. So welcome back. That was from Chris Bertman. It's a really great article that he wrote last winter that I implore you all to read. And he wrote that with the help of today's guest. And we're going to talk about the Oklahoma City bombing. And we are back. Hopefully you can hear us. All I'm thinking about is if the broadcast is actually being sent out. I'm Shane Cashman. This is Alex.
I'm Alex. Shane, I think we're good. You sound good. I'm not seeing any complaints. So
all right, we'll see.
Looks like we're rocking and rolling.
We'll
today.
see. And again, I want to thank everybody last week sending our first round of super chats. That was pretty cool. We are taking super chats now. We'll read those as we'll collect them and read them at 2 different times in the show. Really appreciate you guys sticking around for last week's chaos. It's been wild. We had a lot of people come in and take a look at things, and we'll see.
Yes.
So I'm really excited to talk today with our guest, Jose Galison. Let's bring him in. He's a good friend, and he's been talking about the Oklahoma City bombing for quite some time. I have been thinking about it for a while, too, just because it happened in 95 when I was 10.
Yeah.
And then they executed Timothy McVeigh, the alleged bomber, in 2001. I believe it was June 11th, perhaps. So it was really strange. I remember coming home from my finals, high school finals, and turning on the TV. And I just remember how ghoulish it felt to watch the news report on everything Timothy McVeigh was eating before they executed him.
Yeah.
It's just a weird thing.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I could remember more of it. I was, obviously 10 too. So
Yeah.
it's like
I was a political junkie already.
At 10
so
years
for
old.
whatever, this is probably, I was probably 16 when they executed him. But at 10, I obviously wasn't so much a political junkie, but I was certainly inundated with all the images of the building being bombed.
How could you not be?
Yeah. So let's talk to Jose.
Jose, you with us?
Yeah, I'm with you. I saw a little notification on my phone, so I think we're good. I think we're live.
All right, that's good.
No way, Jose.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see, dude. So like I was saying, I don't know how old you are, but I was 16 when they executed Timothy McVeigh. I remember it felt so ghoulish even at that age to see the TV at 8 a.m. reporting on what this guy was eating before they executed him. And I don't know, how old were you when the bombing happened?
For me, I'm an age. I actually just turned 33 2 days ago, the
Oh
summer
man,
solstice.
happy birthday.
And yeah, appreciate it. I mean, so whatever. I'm 33 now, so it's
Yep.
not really a big deal. Who cares about my age anymore? My birthdays. I have 2 kids, so it really doesn't matter. But yeah, I was pretty young. I mean, if anything, the probably what got me so interested in the Oklahoma City bombing was the fact that I kind of was younger, and I don't know if maybe you guys have a similar view on this being a little bit older, but it just feels like in the modern consciousness, like the Oklahoma City bombings, kind of nothing. I feel like lately it's kind of resurfaced, but most people don't really look at it with a critical eye. They just know there was a bombing. They just kind of accept the official narrative. But most people, I don't even think realize that prior to 9/11, this was like the thing, the
Yeah.
biggest thing. And I don't know if it's just an age thing. Maybe some of the older individuals may have a different look at it. It might be like their 9/11. But for me, I guess that's kind of why I got interested in it. I know 9/11 is like usually the hot topic amongst conspiracy people around our age. But for me, I was like, I guess I wanted something not as mainstream. Maybe it's a hipster in me. And then once I started digging, I'm like, whoa. And then you realize how much it actually really does connect today. I mean, you can see, especially once you start getting to the intel connections and how that works through the day with things like the Whitmer kidnapping and stuff like that, where they kind of
Yep.
are similarly infiltrating right-wing groups and the effects of that. So it's still, kind of using basically pretty much the same playbook. So it's knowing these things, and I think that it was also we were at a critical juncture in technology and the audacity of these these people, to where it was kind of like, I don't know if they just gotten used to not having technology that caught all their every little move, and it was just kind of coming to fruition around that time, that it seems to be they were extra bold in this one, whether you want to say it was like a false flag or a sting gone wrong or a cover up. Either way, it seems there was a lot of audacity, a lot of
A lot of audacity.
I was gonna say like a lot of the school shootings are kind
they're
of like
back.
Yeah,
Sorry.
But real quick, before we go further, why do you think something like this was memory hold? Is it just age? Because there's so many other tragedies that happen and atrocities that happened in the past that we were inundated with every year. But the Oklahoma City bombing seems to have been memory hold. Do you have an idea about that?
Well, like I was saying, I mean, I don't know if it's an age thing, because I mean, it's really hard to tell. Being one of the younger individuals, so that'd be something I almost had to pull people for. I just think it, as I was kind of getting at before my mic decided to cut out for some weird reason.
Glad it's you,
Like I
not
said,
me.
it's kind of like juncture of a time, I think, where technology was coming to play, and so essentially there was the basic building blocks around the 90s. We had like kind of early like dial up and stuff around that time, and there was still video, and so, but we didn't have the means that we do now. I'm so sorry. I don't know why it keeps doing this.
It's the show, dude. The show is cursed.
I'm telling you.
So
yeah, I don't know what it is. I've had
and the gremlins are contagious. But it's all good. I'm going to try to fill the blanks while it's happening. It's also,
I'm back, by the way. I don't know why it keeps doing this.
It's so weird. But okay, before we go any further, because I believe it has been memory hold, and maybe for those people around our age only remember the image of the building being bombed out, the whole faces of the building's gone. What's the basic mainstream version of the Oklahoma City bombing as we understand it?
The basic mainstream, the official narrative is that, I mean, and we can get in the weeds there, but generally speaking, kind of summary of it is that essentially Timothy McVeigh, with the help of Terry Nichols and sort of, kind of, not really, Michael Fortier, depending on how you look at it, essentially put together all these components, put together a ANFO bomb, a truck bomb, parked it about roughly 60 feet in front of the Alfred P. Murrah building on April 19th, a little bit before 9, and then at about 9:02 a.m., it goes off, and kaboom, around just short of 170 people lost their lives. And that is in the official narrative being that it was just them. They had no real outside help. It was just kind of essentially lone wolf. I mean, this is kind of where we get a lot of the lone wolf, archetype is from people like McVeigh. Although I guess it's a little bit of a misnomer because even the official narrative has Terry Nichols, but Terry Nichols was very much more of like a support role, helped him out, and then wasn't even like nearby during it. So according to them, it was basically the implementation was for the most part McVeigh. And that's where it ends. Obviously, I have disputes with that, but we can get into that.
Yeah, what are your disputes? So if the official narrative says that McVeigh is this guy, he's the face of evil, as they used to call him, and you were hinting at earlier, they used to call this the largest, because it was the largest domestic terror attack. And then the idea of like homegrown terrorism was everywhere after something like this. So you have some arguments with the official narrative, and where do those begin with you?
I mean, probably the most obvious would be John Doe 2. There was a multiple month, one of the largest FBI manhunts of all time. And over 20 individuals. I mean, the number, depending on who you count, gets a little bit spotty. And not everyone who was a John Doe 2 eyewitness was actually included in this count, was ever some of them weren't interviewed by the FBI, but around 22 or so, at least, said they saw another individual with Timothy McVeigh before or after on the day of the bombing. None of those individuals end up being interviewed in court, and it was essentially hand waved away as these were misremembering things. Some of the specific individuals seemed to be that they were a little pushed a little bit by the FBI to twist their stories or change their stories or say maybe they didn't remember it this way. And when it was all said and done, that the John Doe 2 thing just kind of dropped. It was kind of a, I guess almost you could say like a false memory syndrome type thing, which obviously that's a whole other rabbit hole I know you're familiar with. But yeah, that got written off as just kind of misremembering or just faulty information out in the ether, when that's not the case. There's plenty of solid, accounts of it. I've actually interviewed on my show as I alluded to, not everyone actually got included in the count. I had Stephen Vassar on my show, who was actually one of the best friends of Terry Yeeke, and he actually had wrote a report after the fact saying he actually saw the Ryder truck prior to the bombing driving by while he was dealing with another call, and he saw another individual in the car with him, and he didn't really get a good look at him, but he wrote this up in his police report, and it disappeared, which is a big part of Terry's story as well, since he had wrote a 9-page report, and then that disappeared as well. His higher-ups made sure that never saw the light of day, essentially requested him to write something else along the lines of more about 1 page as opposed to 9-page, which is pretty long for a police report. And yeah, so see how those things connect a little bit there. But yeah, I've interviewed a John Doe 2 eyewitness. So, and like I said, not all of them actually end up on the official count.
It's weird, this kind of thing where the breaking local news takes over for a brief amount of time and then slowly mutates as the time as we go along in time. And you can see that whether it's Area 51 with the UFO stuff that first crashed and how that narrative changed. You can see it in Sandy Hook. You can see it in Chaos. We talked to Tom O'Neill recently, and all these like local news reports, they shift. And I don't know, I'm constantly thinking, is this just incompetence or is there something darker happening? And do you feel like the more you look at this, that it's not just incompetence, there's something darker happening behind the scenes?
Oh, 100%. As I was telling you in pre-recording, I'm of the opinion, and this may ruffle some feathers in the research community, I lean towards, my opinion is likely some sort of false flag. Now, I will be honest with you and say I can't really prove that because we're coming to intentionality. That's just the pattern recognition in me, to where you see enough connections and you're like, I don't know, this is getting to a level where this is a bit ridiculous. But at the very least, I think it's pretty incontrovertible that it was at the very least a cover-up and perhaps a sting gone wrong, if you don't want to buy into false flag there. We'll cover up after the fact of whatever, as I alluded to with John Doe 2, usually what most people think of when they think of, what it comes to with John Doe 2 is why did this get swept under the rug? A lot of people would assume that it was either an informant, an asset, an agent, or just someone in general that they didn't want this to come out. Because, I mean, it is pretty insane the amount. I mean, it was in April we had the bombing happened. By May, there was internal FBI memos where they were essentially taking all the leads for John Doe 2 and putting them into abeyance, which is essentially, get that out of here. We're not looking into that. And then come June, they had the official announcement. So about half the time they even really were doing the manhunt, it was more just for show. So, I mean, there also was over 20 surveillance tapes that just went, disappeared. That's a big thing. Jesse Trenadu, who his brother was another one of the, quote unquote suicides. He's been looking into for decades now. He originally started, trying to get doing FOIA lawsuits for the surveillance tapes, and they kind of gave him some here and there, but they'd be like, oh, wow, it shuts off at 9:01. Isn't that convenient? Stuff along those lines. And he's been able to show proof that they actually had them. There's been, plenty of them. I mean, I would recommend people go check out my series to go into all the specific examples, that show that, yes, these things did exist. There clearly were surveillance tapes, and now they just magically disappeared. So, I mean, there comes a certain point where you're like, well, I don't know if I can buy this anymore. And at the very least, I would say, as I referred to with Trenadu, you could see into there are definitely individuals that some things were, shirked around, specifically, I'd say with Jesse Trenadu's brother, Kenneth, where they clearly, it looked like there was definitely cover up. If you get into the specifics of that story, there was cover up on the Fed's hand on that thing, because he was in a federal transfer center when he up and suicided himself, essentially a la Epstein, very much in one of those type of cells where you're not supposed to be able to.
Yeah, when you talk about filing FOIA requests and not getting all the surveillance tapes back, it reminded me of Epstein and the tapes that for some reason turned off. Real quick, I want to go back to what you said at the beginning. And why do you think this type of talk about perhaps there being cover-ups ruffles the feathers of researchers of this movement?
I think to some extent, and I can understand why. I'm kind of like, I find myself in the middle of this rift in the parapolitics, conspiracy, whatever world you want to call it, where the reputable researchers out there do tend to have a lot of issues with the salacious types, like the Alex Jones. I'm trying to think other names. Maybe some people might have issues like a Tripoli or something. I guess I have a different view where I just look at that as more like conspiracy entertainment. And I guess I just respect myself enough to know that I don't buy everything that they say. If it, matches up with things I've heard before, I might be like, oh, okay. So I think it's just people don't like the idea of, and luckily I don't consider myself a journalist or anything, so I don't necessarily need to really toe that line. But people find you, you would know this as a journalist, kind of just getting into unfounded territory where you make these sort of what they would consider to be leaps.
Yeah,
but I'm very much
such a dirty word.
Yeah. I'm very much a pattern noticer in that you get to a certain point where you're like, I don't know. I mean, I have a hard time buying into, a big old oopsies. Like there just comes a certain level where you're like, I'm sorry, I can't take the oopsies explanation.
That being a pattern noticer is important. And you have to also, I think, be skeptical of all the patterns you might be noticing, because you go down these rabbit holes, you see a lot.